Good morning, everyone. Welcome to NorthStar Community. So excited to be here, both online and in person. And we continue to talk about recovery from addiction. And it's a tough but worthwhile journey. So again, make sure we always understand that when we talk about addiction, it's easy for people to make the assumption we're talking about substances. But we're also talking about compulsive behaviors. We're also talking about people addicted to relationships. And they're all equally damaging, and unfortunately for a lot of us, we do 2 or 3 of those usually. We're not usually just one of the above. One of the things that it's just, really getting more and more pervasive in our society is the compulsive behaviors are just becoming so difficult. We always take from a historical point of view to learn some things. When we did Prohibition in the 20s and 30s, it didn't work, and I'm not saying we should be doing that now, certainly. But one of the top predictors of addiction and addictive behaviors is how easily accessible drugs are, or compulsive behaviors, or relationships. Our online presence has really made the compulsive behaviors much more pervasive. I know I've had debates with people again about what is is addiction more than it was? I clearly say it is now, but a lot of it's now compulsive behaviors. And the example I use is when I was a teenager, if I wanted to go get a Playboy, I had to go into a drugstore. I had to pick it up. I had to sheepishly take it to the stand, of course, mix in with my Sports Illustrated and whatever else, hoping they wouldn't really notice. But the fact is, I had to go to a store. I had to embarrass myself. I had to do all those things if I was going to buy a Playboy magazine. Now, not the case. Now, I can do it online, and of course, much, much, much more deep and darker than that. So accessibility really does predict a lot about our drug use. So here's something people don't realize is back in the 20s and 30s, Prohibition actually did have an impact. And alcohol consumption was reduced by almost 50%. Again, I don't want you to hear I'm advocating that, because obviously we also got a lot of very evil mob activity from all that. Because, my attitude is we're going to use, and it's just a matter of how hard we have to work at it. So just like marijuana, I want everybody to hear clearly from me, I do not like marijuana. I don't think it's harmless like everybody wants to believe it is. I always like to make fun of the article I read about this one guy was right. He said, it's amazing how all the governors of these states who are promoting legalization of marijuana have suddenly forgotten all the problems that marijuana causes because of all the tax revenue. The fact is that, and here's something else, marijuana now is 7 times more potent than it was in the 70s. We have become good at synthesizing substances. We have become good at offering up addictive stuff online. Even now relationships so many times are started online. So you get the point here. It's tough. And then look at our food consumption, just to illustrate how pervasive things are getting. So in don't hold me to this exactly, but 2000 we had about 800 million people were obese. Now it's 2.1 billion people in the world are obese. Why is that? Because our food has become so readily accessible and processed and, those kind of things. And so the point is that it's hard for us to not be addicted, I should say. And so I hope we can continue as we talk about the differing things of addictive thinking. We can continue to get on the journey of a rich, full, meaningful life Because when we're addicted and when we're in our addictive thinking, we are not going to have a rich, full, meaningful life. Because if you think about it, what's addiction? Again, our definition is habitual behavior to avoid pain. Well, if I'm avoiding pain, I am not moving forward. I am not living my life. I'm not living my purpose. I mean, if I talk to someone whose hurts, habits, and hang-ups are very, very strong in their life, and I say, what's your purpose in life? A lot of times I'm greeted with anger and resentment that I didn't even think about asking them to have a purpose in their life. Because what we really are is we're in survival. So today we're going to talk about the flavors and colors of reality. And again, I'm getting this from Addictive Thinking by Dr. Tversky. And the real subtitle is what's so important for us as we go into our recovery. It's not all dazzling colors, and it's not all drab and gray. See, the problem is when we become addictive, we want everything to be dazzling. We want everything to be right now. We want everything to be easy. We want all that stuff, right? And so when I talk particularly to younger people, when I make suggestions like maybe you're starting to have an alcohol issue, maybe marijuana is a problem or other drugs, they're like, they can't even fathom a life without all that. Talk about a boring life. I mean, who wants to live like that? I'd rather die than have that. Well, the point is, as addicts, as we know, I will state the obvious again, is addictive thinking doesn't work. And the stuff we tell ourselves, but life doesn't have to be as dazzling all the time, and it doesn't have to be dull, drab, and gray all the time. So we've talked a lot in here about how we confuse time, and we can say to ourselves, well, I can get off Facebook anytime I want. I don't have to be on there. I went 2 days without being on it. Right. But you're back on it, right? Or always like with marijuana users, they always tell me how non-addictive it is. Well, then quit using for a month. Prove it to me. Well, now wait a minute here. I mean, you get the point. And the thing that we have to keep reminding ourselves, for many of us in our recovery, we had trauma and abandonment in our childhoods, or we've had trauma in our adult life. We've had all these things. We've grown to dislike ourselves. In fact, I would say we loathe ourselves in many ways. And if in some ways, if we could just take all the addictive thinking and all of the addictions we have, really our really terrible self-image is really an addiction that really drives so much of this. So what do? We go out and we find habitual ways to avoid pain. And so I always like to say to people, you're really not so bad. And that's an important statement because I'm not saying you're perfect, but I'm also telling you you're not all bad. And we go both sides. And that's why this colors and flavors, the dazzling and the dull, we can't just somewhere come in the middle and have some good days and some bad days and some medium days. It's got to be all or nothing. That's all part of our addictive thinking. So always again, we were in our meeting today, and I closed our prayer with thanking God for all the pain in our life. Now, make sure you understand, I don't like pain. None of us like pain. But I think if we were to be honest with ourselves, if you're sitting here listening to this, you've had some pain to get you here. Because if you didn't have pain, you wouldn't be listening to me. You'd be out using, doing, and being crazy and nutty and all the stuff we do. So Jesus tells us in Matthew 5, the Beatitudes, which are so beautiful. And I do like, this is the Message version, but I really like the way he words this. So Jesus is telling us, you're blessed when you're at the end of your rope. With less of you, there's more of God and his rule. That is so true. Let's be honest, when things are going well, God, you can hang over here. I've got it, all right? When things go bad, that's when we get much closer to God. And I do wish there was a way we could kind of fix that, but I think that's kind of how we are. But the fact is that God knows that when we're in misery, we're more likely to be listening. You're blessed when you feel you've lost what is most dear to you, whatever that is. For many of us, it's addictive behaviors. That'd be the most important thing in our lives. Only then can you be embraced by the one most dear to you. I always think about this on how many of us will say, well, I always talk about your childhood. And again, make sure I always say this. It isn't I care about your childhood. I just care about how your childhood is still affecting you today, right? And so I've had a lot of people say, well, my dad, he drank a lot, but he went to work every day. He was home at night. And I said, but what did he do when he came home? Well, he sat in a chair drinking beer, watching TV, and being put out with everybody. Yeah, that's not connection. No. And that's what we have to keep hearing. We got to understand that our addiction is what many of us need to lose so that that is what's most dear to us. And only then can we be embraced. But that's when God can be there. God's always there, but that we can hear him. And then you're blessed when you're content with just who you are, no more, no less. That's the moment you find yourselves proud owners of everything that can't be bought. We always thought, I'm sure you've heard this in some of your recovery circles, but we got this big hole in the middle of us, and we just throw everything in it. We throw stuff, we throw people, we throw substances. We do all this stuff to help us to feel better, and at best it happens for a moment. So what Jesus is saying here is, it's when you finally can become content with you, when you see the goodness in you, when you understand the connections and the love you have. That's when you can actually be someone that you want to be. But when we're addicts, what do we expect? We expect rejection. We expect to be criticized. We expect to be all those things. And we live our lives surly, angry, distant, with bravado, all those things. Because it's our way of keeping people away and staying somewhat safe. But here's the good news, is our brains do have an amazing capacity to heal. It's called plasticity, brain plasticity. They've shown how, like with the damage that we've done with alcohol and drugs and stuff, our brain can recircuit and go around some of the damage and really kind of come back to who we were. It's an amazing thing. Now, the problem with brain plasticity is that we also mess up our brains with all that. But the fact is we can heal. And then the other part is the beauty of this is we have a Lord and Savior who has an amazing capacity to love, and it's called grace. But think about this. This is some research I saw, a Princeton study. For people with non-college degrees over 50, you know what the 3 top causes of death are now? Drug overdoses, alcohol-related liver failures, and suicide. Those are 3 leading causes of death now in our older population. That is tragic. And the term that they give this is, these are deaths of despair. And we can relate to it, right? Us that are going through all this recovery. I would imagine every one of us who's gone in the recovery world understands the thought of suicide. We certainly understand about alcohol-related liver failure for a lot of us because of all the stuff we've done. I don't know how many of you out there have been told by your doctor, if you don't quit drinking, your liver's not going to last much longer, right? And of course we go, you're right, and I'm going to stop drinking right now, right? It's hard. But think about it. What is causing this? Why is there so much despair out there? And for us in recovery, we talk about the trauma so many of us have faced in our lives. Like I was thinking the other day at NorthStar, we were talking about it a little bit. I think there was around 15 there, and I counted, 5 that had scored 8 and above on the ACE, and I think it went a little bit further. I think it was 7 had scored 6 or above on the ACE. It's not a coincidence, and thank God that people who with the high ACE scores are coming, because that determines so much about us. And it makes sense when you hear about the statistic on ACE again, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Survey, is if you score 6 or more without intervention, you on average die 20 years younger than someone who scored 0. And when you hear about the deaths of despair, it makes sense, right? We live with anger, resentment, hatred for self-hatred, resentment and hatred towards others. None of it works for us. And so the problem is, we start saying to ourselves, there must be more to life than this shame and this pain. For most of us, we got started on the path to addiction pretty early in our lives. 9, 10, 11, it's mind-boggling sometimes how young some of us were when we first started to, and we were exposed to so much from our own families or lack of families. And so we started saying to ourselves, there's something wrong with me. I feel out of place all the time. There's something wrong with me. And, of course, the problem is when you're a teenager, probably everybody else in the whole school is feeling the same way, but we really feel that. And so what do? We start saying to ourselves, reality is not good enough, or it's painful. And the normal rewards and pleasures are simply not good enough. Getting good grades, who cares? Maybe doing something athletically, who cares? So what do? We check out. And then what do? We get into the trap of we seeing ourselves as deprived of the real thing, of that dazzling life, of excitement and drama. And, of course, our society really perpetuates that, right? And I think the happiness trap is dangerous for us in America. We love this one. There was a quote by Philip Reif, who was a psychologist and philosopher, foreseeing the trend in the triumph of the therapeutic uses of faith out of Freud. He goes, religious man was born to be saved. Psychological man is born to be pleased. And I think we can hear in that how dangerous and empty that is. And that's why I think, obviously, if you're listening to me, you share this belief. I don't know how anyone can recover without God. I just don't know how you can do it, because that's exactly what we do. We are so busy trying to be pleased, so busy trying to be happy, we forget about purpose, we forget about satisfaction, all those kind of things. And of course, what do we do in our addictive thinking? We looked around, and what do? We said, oh, everybody else is happier than me, right? Everybody else got it together. I don't. Everybody, look at them. They're so happy. And then what do? So now what do? We go out on social media, and we get on Facebook just to torture ourselves and go, oh, look at that family. They're all together smiling. They went on vacation together. Oh, look at this one. They're just so, life couldn't be better. The fact is we're all hurting. We all have stuff. We all have good times too. But the point is, I tell people this all the time. If you don't feel good about yourself, get off Facebook, because that's what you're doing. You're going out, and you're taking a hammer to your thumb every time you go there. That's going to be one of my subjects coming up, is all that does to us. So then what about this drab and gray, blah, blah, blah? My world was drab and gray. This is after this guy decided to quit using. He goes, my world was drab and gray. My family, my job, my home life, my car, all were gray. I cannot stand everything being gray. I need color. And guess what? My addiction provided that color, right? So one of the things we have to understand here is anhedonia. The term anhedonia is so important to understand here. Anhedonia, if I were to put it into one word, I go, blah. That's what anhedonia is. I'm not clinically depressed. I'm not sad. I'm not mad. I'm not happy. I am blah. That's what anhedonia is. If you think about it, it makes sense. Because we go from this dazzling world of drugs, and we finally decide, well, my life's so messed up, I'm finally realizing that I got to do something about this. I'm powerless, and I'm out of control, so I got to do something. So I give up all this stuff. Well, your poor brain's over here been counting on you to feed it all the stuff you've been doing, and now that's all gone. And you expect your brain just to get up and start moving. And your brain's going, whoa, wait a minute here. Sort of like if some of us that haven't done a push-up in 40 years, if I said to you, you got to start doing push-ups every day, you're not going to be very good at it. That's what anhedonia is. It's just the physiological reaction to all that stuff you've taken away, be it substances, compulsive behaviors, or broken relationships again. All that stuff, we're left to our own. We're left just to face it with ourselves. And it takes a while. And here's the problem. I've known people who have had anhedonia for over a year. So if you don't understand this, guess what? It's pretty easy to relapse, because what you're saying to yourself is just one sip. Just one's all I need to get that back. I'm sick of this. Or I'm just going to go out. I'm not going to text these people right now. Well, I'm going to send them one. Just going to see, right? Or I'm not going to order anything from Amazon today. Well, okay, I'm going to order something, but I'm going to keep it under $5. It'll just give me something. Do you see how tempting this is? Because nobody wants to dole, dray, and grab all the time. Sometimes not so bad, but we certainly don't want it all the time. I mean, I can think of one person in particular who told me, he says, I can't take this anymore. I cannot take not using because my world has lost its color. It is absolutely not worth living. And, of course, my appeal is to be patient, be patient. That falls into really good categories with impulsive addicts, right? We're all really good at that one. So, of course, the only thing we can say is one day at a time, one day at a time. Just get through the day. It's going to come back. Your brain and plasticity is going to come back. You're going to be that person again. But the problem is, for many of us, think about, why did we use so much? Why did we get so eaten up with the destruction of our lives? Is because we just wanted to feel normal. It wasn't we really wanted to feel high after a while because that wasn't working anymore. I mean, all of us can tell the stories, all of us that are cocaine and heroin. Well, I'll tell about how that first time was the greatest thing that ever happened to us, and we chase it ever after that because our body does do things. But a lot of times what happens is the reason we really quit a lot of times because it doesn't work for us anymore. It isn't because we want to quit and all that, but what we want is we just want to feel normal, whatever that is. And when we step into the recovery world, our life just becomes gray again, tasteless. Think about some of your, I don't know, my mother used to make this awesome butterscotch pie, awesome meringue. It was awesome. Think if she'd put no sugar in that. Would I have said that was awesome? Texture the same, looks the same? No, it would have been tasteless. That's what anhedonia is. And we have to understand it. Instead of judging ourselves and saying, there's something wrong with me, I'm depressed. No, you have anhedonia, and it is important to understand. And for people out there that are non-addicts now, they're saying now, this one study I've seen, they're saying that the United States is leading the world in this, that 5% of our population is currently addicted to substances. That doesn't count all the other stuff. But for us that aren't addicted, it's hard to understand sometimes, right? When we say, if you don't stop drinking, if you don't stop using, if you don't blah, 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 you're going to lose everything. I was reading this author. She was talking about, she's a psychiatrist, and I very loved her candidness here. She talked about how she became addicted to, it started out with the vampire love stories. What are those called? I forgot them now. And then she got into, of course, some of the other books. And basically what she got down to was it got to the point where she kept getting deeper and deeper. So she really got into women's porn genre, right? Now, this is a psychiatrist here. We're not talking about, educated. And she goes, you know what? I was up at 2 a.m. reading, and that was the darker, the shades of gray stuff. And she goes, at 2 a.m, I'm reading this, and I went, this is probably not good for me. It's probably good for my career. But she said, what really got her to stop was, she already realized it was a problem. What got her to stop was it just wasn't doing good anymore. It had come to where it was just nothing. But we understand that, don't we? Because it's like we just keep using and using. It's about just trying some way to feel normal. But we're so dissatisfied. We're in so much pain. And some of the reason why our dissatisfaction is so high is because our outlook on reality is distorted. Our view of the world is nutty. Let's just be honest. One of the ways, how do we do it? We have perfectionism in our life. If we're not perfect, there's something wrong with this. If we're not feeling really bad about ourselves, there's something wrong with this. That's why I always think it's so important when I say, you're not so bad. That's healthy. That's the fact. We're not perfect, but we're not all this bad either. But our outlook on reality is so distorted as addicts. We're chronically dissatisfied. It's hard for us to feel anything, to experience anything. We're so we're just so worried about other people harming us. We're so worried about not getting our next high. All that stuff, we're trying to get gratification when the fact is it doesn't work. But it does give us a little bit of color in our world at times. So this is Dr. Torsky writing here. The addicted person has often shut off entire feeling system to avoid certain unpleasant feelings, right? That's what we've done. We're avoiding the bad. As the addict is helped to realize this, he or she begins to understand that much of the darkness and gray was due to a sensory blockage, our adaptation, our keeping people away, lack of connection, our using. As a person becomes more comfortable with feelings and dismantles this massive defense system, he or she begins to appreciate some of the color and excitement that does exist in the world. Because there is color and excitement in the world. Doesn't have to have drugs with it. I know one of the things I always get put out with is being stuck in places where people seem to not have a good time without being drunk, stoned, high, whatever. I just like, isn't there something else we can do here that you don't have to have all that? But if that's how we've grown up, we don't want to experience things as ourselves. And we want to feel normal. We want to feel part of it. But the fact is, so we have to look at, so I want you to help you understand this. So some of us out here with the anhedonia piece, we'll call that addictive depression. And then we have depression. And a lot of us think we're depressed when we have anhedonia. Some of us have both. We are depressed, and we do have anhedonia. And, of course, some of us are clinically depressed. What's important here is for us to figure this out, because let's think about it for a moment. If I'm telling you that the way to get your life back is to be drug-free, right, or to be compulsive behavior-free or crazy relationship-free, if we get put on meds, that delays our recovery if we're not careful. It's so hard to figure this out. It's not easy. So if any of you out there are going to your doctor because you're feeling the blah, make sure you let them know about your addiction side so they can understand that piece. Because sometimes the last thing you need are meds, and sometimes it's the first thing you need. It depends on where you're at in all this. But addictive depression, something's gone awry in our brain. It is a disease of the brain. And the other thing is there's no real starting point. You've always kind of felt this way, right? For most of us, how many of you can remember not feeling, or not using for that matter, but how many of you can really remember what it was like before? What you were like before you got into all this? It's hard. That's one way to help you understand the difference between depression and addictive depression. So depression, there's usually a starting and stopping point. Addictive depression, not so much. Didn't get a fair shake in life. Were you out there, these things that help you kind of see. Were you that thrill seeker and hellraiser? We were talking about that the other night. I was telling a story about one of the guys that had to go in recovery from, in college. Obviously, we just thought he was funny and crazy. He later on went into recovery, and now is a physician, so good story. But he was up drunk as a skunk, and he was 60 feet up, hanging off of a ladder, one hand, one foot, yelling at all of us. Of course, we're all down there going, yeah, all that stuff. You know how it is. That's why the average, people who have all this stuff don't live as long. So he had all that fun. He was doing all that crazy stuff. But you know what? Nobody really knew him, right? That's how we do it. So we saw him as cool and funny and smart. But we never really, I couldn't tell you much about him personally. That most of the time I saw him, he was drinking and being funny. So the big thing is more often than not, we're dissatisfied with life for as long as we can remember. So maybe the term for us to think about is chronic dissatisfaction. If you had chronic dissatisfaction your entire life, it may not be depression. And again, chronic dissatisfaction, and we talked about this already, but real quick, is it's due to unrealistic expectations of ourselves, of others, of life, all those things. The fact is, it isn't because we're actually so deprived as so much as we just have unrealistic expectations. And you know what I'm going to say. Support groups are the answer here. Get yourself in a support group. Get yourself with a counselor. If you need meds, get with yourself with a psychiatrist who can hear what you're going on. Be honest with them. Doesn't do any good not to be. They're not going to arrest you. They're not going to throw you in jail. They're not going to judge you. But the fact is, what we have to get to in our life is it is a little dazzling and colorful, and it's a little gray. That's what life it really is. And we have to learn how to get through the gray times. We have to figure out ways to enjoy the dazzling color times, because we don't do either one of those very well. But support groups can give us that realistic expectation, can help us to get through it, also to help us understand what healthy looks like. Because we've shut off our entire feeling system, most of us, for a long time in our life. So as we get support, we can start to understand that much of our darkness and gray was due to us blocking, keeping safe. So the goal is to become more comfortable with feelings and dismantle our massive defense system. You can't do that unless you're with other people who've been through it with you. So depression comes and goes. Anhedonia will go away. But addictive depression, look and see if it's in there all the time. It's important to understand the difference. So 12-step logic for us here is only people who have suffered in some way can support another. And it's really true. For you that have been through anhedonia, you can relate to that when you hear someone come in and they describe an anhedonia. Tell them about it. Tell them how you got through it. Deep communion and compassion is formed much more through shared pain than pleasure. Hate to tell you again, but pain is the antidote. And you know, Jesus says this to Peter again. He goes, Peter, you must be ground like wheat, and once you have recovered, then you can turn and help the brothers. A little bit of a paraphrase there, but that's what Jesus is saying. So, how do we do this? Live with, I haven't brought this up recently, but I assume we're all doing it, but we need to live with gratitude. That's one of the most important things we can do. Quit sitting there feeling sorry for yourself and how the world hasn't treated you right, blah, blah, blah. The fact is, it's up to you how the world treats you in many ways, how you respond to it. So write down 2 or 3 gratitudes per day. Exercise. You've got to get yourself moving. Pray and meditate. Journal something good that happened to you each day. Perform one random act of kindness. And I'm going to throw this in. You can start hearing a lot from me on this. Reduce your social media time. I can't say it enough. I wish you could make yourself not even look at your phone a couple days a week. Do something, because it has taken over our lives. And, of course, we need to get healthy people in our lives through support groups, through all those kind of things. So I'll finish with a couple more quotes here. We can better understand and more readily see our confining walls that we build to protect ourselves when we are with other people sharing the similar stuff. In the safe confines of fellowship meetings, we truly can begin to dismantle our walls. And then hopefully we can return to our families in the right ways, friends, all that. So at NorthStar Community, we always close every meeting with the prayer of serenity. One of the things I always love gives a hard time about is when we're talking about how stressed we are and how anxious we are and all that stuff. I go, I think there's a prayer out there somewhere. I'm not sure. But I think there's a prayer out there that's pretty wise. And if we can just hear this prayer, we can do so much better. So let us close with this prayer of serenity. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Living one day at a time, enjoying one moment at a time, accepting hardships as a pathway to peace, taking, as Jesus did, the sinful world as it is, not as I would have it. Trusting that Jesus will make all things right if I surrender to his will, that I may be reasonably happy in this life and supremely happy with him forever in the next. Amen. So thank you for joining me. If you ever need to talk, you can call me at 804-746-5081. You can also text me at csimpson@wgva.church. Love to hear from you. Don't be in pain by yourself. Figure it out. Find the right people. And life can be, at least some of the time, dazzling and colorful. So thank you again.